One day, poor Zelda in the castle garden with her friend Terrako. She remembered the day when she and her mother was discovered some ancient ruins when they explored in the kingdom Hyrule, and also when she came across with Terrako. Despite that he's a guardian of time, she can always rely on him though. And even after all these years, she is very grateful to have Terrako as her friend. Because he is always helping Zelda either to find a book or any particular item either in her room or somewhere else in the castle. She can always rely on him. And after all this time, she is grateful to have Terrako as her friend. Even sometimes when she feeling sad and cry, Terrako is always there to help her to cheer her up, which always works. And for that, she really cares about him. She really thinks he is her best friend. Even the one sometimes when she is busy with other some royal duties, he understands that, and sometimes he just walking around in the castle by himself to do some explorations or just doing some things that when Griselda is occupied by something else to return to. But it happens that Zelda usually takes with him either around the town or in a castle garden where she sits under a tree and to read. She even usually read for him, even though that perhaps she doesn't even know if he really understands her language or basically if he can hear. But she always pretends that he understands her, which he really does. He do understand her, despite maybe he may not be able to communicate with her by words himself, but doing some sounds and emotions like that, she understands him perfectly. Despite that they are different, but they both are happy to have met all those years ago as it was always meant to happen. Even though Zelda, she is very grateful to have Terrako as a friend by her side, even that he can actually help her with almost anything when she needs help with. Even one day when Zelda didn't have any royal duties to taken care of, she was getting bored, so she decided to take a walk outside town, just in a forest nearby, to have something to do. And she decided to bring a book with her so that she could read. Since it is always a great spot for reading, though, when she told her parents about this, they were okay with that as long as she was just safe. And since they knew that Zelda was able to take care of herself since she had been trained by some of the castle guards to be trained as in self-defense. And of course, she brought her friend Terrako and even something to eat if she would get hungry. The travel to the small forest outside town took about maybe 20 minutes. Since it was just outside of the small town, she actually knew a perfect spot, but as she promised her parents that she would not go far in the forest as long as she were able to see the castle and the town, she would be safe. And she promised. She actually found a small spot where she saw was suitable for to sit down under a tree. Even though that when Terrako sat next to her, she started reading from both of them. And even after that, after she read for maybe an hour, she had actually started feeling tired, and she fell asleep. And even Terrako somehow went in a sleep mode. Even after 2 hours of being sleeping, she actually wakes up when she hears a bird singing right above her, and she really had realized how she wasn't even realized how long she had been asleep. But as long as it was still sunlight outside, she did better than it for her though. but she decided to read some more and have something to eat. But after about another half hour of reading, she felt a little bit bored, and she wanted to do something else, and she decided to take a walk in the forest. But even when Terrako heard her talking about that, he somehow moved up and down by his legs as a sign that and pointed to the town. And she remembered her promise to her parents, but they wouldn't even go so far. Maybe another 2 6 feet inside in the town in the forest, and they will still be able to see the town. And even though Terrako still want to be close as town as possible, but they agreed to do so as well. And as they was walking in the between some of the trees, Terrako could still see the town between the trees. So as long as they could see the town, they would be safe. And as they was walking, both axes stopped and listened to some of the birds just above them singing. And they somehow, as he closed his eye or something, Zelda was walking, and he didn't even realize though. And even Zelda, she was completely unaware that Terrako wasn't even behind her. And that was probably a very good thing, because just another second before she had stepped maybe another 2 more steps, the ground beneath her gave up. It she fell down. It is it turned out this ground on which she was walking was a shallow hole, maybe an old trap. There was an old wolf trap. And luckily it was the hole was empty beneath her and she fell down. And she screamed of pain. Terrako jerked up and stopped up, opened his eye and looked around for and could even see Zelda anywhere. As he walked deeper in the forest, when he was about to do walking in deeper in the forest, he actually heard a scream. He turned around, but he couldn't even realize exactly pinpoint exactly where the screaming was coming from. But as he tried to figure out exactly, the scream came again, but this time a bit louder, and was able to pinpoint the direction. He was walking as fast as he could, and saw this hole was there, and looked down and saw Zelda at the bottom. She told them that she couldn't even get up because her leg was broken, or at least she had hurt her leg. And there were no ropes or anything, vines, or even a tree branch long enough for that to could be put down in the hole so that he can take her up. Even despite that he would have found a tree branch long enough to put down in the hole, he wouldn't be strong enough to pull and lift her up also. She told him to go back to the castle to find help. So he did so, but as he was only halfway to the castle, he stopped. He didn't even realize until that moment he wouldn't be able to communicate with others because he was unable to speak the language as they were. But he was actually remember one thing. He could communicate with them on writing. Because he remembers Zelda had been teaching him how to write. So he ran as fast as he could back to the castle, up to Zelda's room, found a piece of paper and a pen, and wrote what happened, and wrote back, ran as fast as he could to the front room where the king and the queen were sitting, talking, when he walked up to them, and one of the guards took the paper and handed over to the king. As the king read, his eyes became big. He was terrified what happened. He told his wife, the queen, and told the guard to bring another guard and a rope, and they all went as fast as they could to follow him because in the note he said what happened also he said, follow me. So they went to the forest and the hole. And luckily though, Zelda was able to pull up by the guards, and they carried her away to the castle, and the castle doctor examined her leg and was told her It was broken, but luckily though, able be able to fix. He put a cast on her leg and told her not to walk around for the next few weeks until the leg is healed. And that was actually though when Zelda was happy that Terrako had helped her. Even her parents even asked her how, why, or at least how she ended up in the hole in the first place. But she told them she was just walking in the forest and suddenly the ground beneath her caved in, and she fell down. That she believes maybe it was an old wolf trap or something, and that she fell down and hurt her leg by the fall. At least the parents was okay, but she was safe, and she didn't even break her promise because she could still see the town beneath all the pines on the trees, and there was big opening between the holes though, between the trees. She was maybe 2 feet inside in the forest. So as long as she had followed their rules, even Terrako was happy that Zelda was okay. Even after that same day, Zelda had told Terrako she was grateful to have him as a friend, and that he was able to walk in town to telling her family and bring back some guards what had happened. But despite that she had to be in bed for the next couple of weeks, it was driving her crazy. After just barely a week, she was barely such crazy that she didn't want to do anything. All she could do was read books, having Terraco's company, play cards, or anything. But the one thing she wanted to do was be able to sit down in the castle garden to read a book. But the parents was not allowing that to happen because she couldn't even walk around with a cast. And Terrako felt sorry about that. But he then realized there was something that he wished he could do for her until he came up with a great idea. He actually took a paper and a pen and designed something and went to the king and cat and the queen and introduced this new the thing for them, and they agreed. And it was actually a special designed crutches for Zelda, so that she would be able to walk around in the castle and so that she could visit the castle garden without with some support for underneath her arms. Even when was told about this and that it was Terraco's idea, she smiled and said, "Thank you, Terraco." Despite though that she must have one guard by her side all the time, no matter what, and not to question about it. She agreed to do so, even though after all this happened. She was just grateful that Terrako had been there for her, despite all the things that happened when she fell down in the hole about a week earlier. But with the Terrako's help, and with the guard, she was also able to walk around in the castle, to talk to some of the staff, and even spend some time with the parents, and even spend time in the castle garden with Terrako reading some book. Even was allowed to walk around in town with Terrako so that she could get some fresh air and even spend some time with people. And after all, since she was going to be the next queen of the kingdom of Hyrule, it was best to her to to interact with the people. And it was also a good thing because she was getting a little bit bored of just being able to walk around castle and just sit in the castle garden. She wanted to talk to others, which her parents didn't mind. As she did, there were even some of the people actually asked her how did her accident even happen. She just smiled and laughed a bit, and when she told them, they were actually laughing at themselves because as long as she was happy about it, a little bit comic event that happened. But after a few weeks, her leg was actually healed. And for that moment, she always remembered one simple rule to herself. Always make sure not be falling down a tree or a hole or anything that will make her harm again. Despite that her parents had her have a guard around her, she actually decided maybe it was no time to have a guard around her anymore, since that now she was back to health again, but her leg was healed. But her parents allowed to have the guard around her for not just a short time, just to make sure. And if she was going out in the forest, always, and that they all said, always make sure to avoid any areas of caves or anything that could show any signs of holes. But the one thing that Zelda told her parents, how would she know if there was any old animal traps in the forest? Because it's not like they're not like the hunters put up a sign saying careful animal trap and a point in the direction. And both the parents said fair point, so they actually decided maybe it was if you could have something, maybe a stick or something, to that walk around pointing the ground, just like something like that. Even though she thought maybe that was a little bit too unusable idea, but she agreed to do so. But after that accident, Zelda decided to avoid walking around in the forest for at least for the time being, except for standing on the spot where she and Terrako were sitting when they were starting reading a book. That spot was safe, at least that she knew about. But if she was going in the forest, she would bring either a guard with her, just in case, and of course, Terrako was still company. Despite after all this happened, Zelda had called Terrako that he was her true best friend. Despite it happened, if he had even followed with her that day, her parents wouldn't have found her for much later on, because without Terraco's help, she would probably been stuck in the hole for a longer period, and no one would have not been able to find her, perhaps until maybe at night time, or maybe another next day. Depends first, of course. Even when Terraco remembers that the day the accident happened, but he was grateful that he actually was to company with her after that. Even in his mind, having Zelda as a close friend, because even after all this time then together when she was covering up, he actually saw her as his best friend and also as his true friend. And for that moment, both of them realized they were meant to meet all those years ago for the very first time when Zelda and her mother was exploring their kingdom of Hyrule, when they came across that the place where Terrako was waiting. It was like it was fate, but they were actually both agreed that they were meant to be true friends. And this is how Zelda and Terrako became true friends. The end.